Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life, and hosted this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Arjan Visser. Hey, Arjan.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And you're across the world in the Netherlands, which we'll talk more about that because that's on my bucket list. Haven't been there yet.
Yeah, it is worth to visit, and but I live in the part that most people don't know of the country, where we don't have windmills and we have hills, so
Uh-huh.
it's not all flat land.
Got it. Okay. Well, just so people can know you, I'm going to read your bio and then we'll continue on. So, Arjan Visser is a human-centered futurist and business strategy architect with over 20 years of experience in executive leadership development. He has worked extensively with business leaders, governmental departments, nonprofit organizations, and family-owned businesses across the world. His unique approach blends strategic foresight with personal growth, helping leaders align their future vision with their authentic identity. Arjan is more than a coach or a peer mastered host. He is a dedicated travel companion on the journey towards future leadership. So I'm going to let you tell your story. How did this all start out? Because I know you didn't just start out there.
Yes, well, as a now called a futurist, I have also learned to keep on looking back to what's my own path, my own history. And sometimes you just discover something new and you actually rephrase your relationship with your own past. Well, where I come from, born in the west part of the country, as part of a middle class family, but like now my mother is discovering, I at a young age always sensed that some things are there that no one talks about and doesn't see yet. And then later they just seem to unfold and happen. So with hindsight, I said something at the age of 13 that really shaped my life around 30. I didn't want to be a different person on the Sunday as I was on the Monday. That set me up for finding out who I am and finding belonging in getting more clarity and language about my identity. After my study, I ended up in IT, like most people in the late 90s, and I studied operating models, more very technical subject in a way. And actually, I still do operating models. I went from technical operating models to business operating models to leadership operating models and now to personal growth. How do I operate and how do I keep momentum? And that's a bit the thread through all my stages where I went from IT projects to boardroom consulting to leadership coaching. And I flipped it intentionally to human-centered futurizing, uh, 2019, looking just at what I did. It was not just about the product of a strategy or a vision I facilitated in the boardroom. It was actually about helping people to see a future perspective that they desired and they felt authentically drawn to. And without making it fluffy, we just created that, simulated that using creative techniques like putting it with Lego bricks on the table and walk around what you metaphorically foresee that the future can unfold. And I learned through facilitating those processes that ownership is the strongest motive for healthy growth from an individual and an organization perspective. But if you can't see it and you can't articulate it, it will probably never unfold, manifest. And I'm playing actually with all those techniques from peer masterminds to individual coaching. And once in a while, I still love to hang out in the boardroom, getting a futurizing strategy on the table.
Wonderful. And you've said a lot in that little bit there. Um, because so many times organizations or even people, teachers, we're talking about how do we motivate someone, but you really can't motivate someone. The motivation always comes from within. But if the person doesn't have their why, if you will, if they don't know what they're working towards, then it's hard for them to be motivated.
That's so true. And thank you for naming that. We can't motivate people. So the big question is, why are we surrounded by people who try to motivate other people to work out their own agenda? Because the reaction to being motivated is burnout. Our intrinsic flame
Mhm.
we put aside to please or meet expectation of the people that try to motivate us. And what we so need is people that inspire us to let go that dominant thought of our own inner conversation and be inspired to just look further than what we currently think that is possible. But the internal processing is essential for not losing our own little flame, but also become a wildfire in a way of our creativity overflowing and contributing the most beautiful gift we have for others to give an expression of our own uniqueness. But it starts with that you have to resist that someone tries to motivate you,
Mhm.
which is hard. But when you know it, it's all little bit less hard.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've observed that, for example, companies where it's a larger company, where, I've been in companies where they're rolling up business after business. And so the people making the decisions are just so far from the people in the field.
Hmm.
And so they're trying to motivate them by telling them you have to get these numbers or we're going to fire you or we're going to give you some monetary something, but they're so far from the people in the so if you're that person in that organization, how do you keep your little flame going and still um, help the organization?
Well, that's actually quite a contrast and a paradox in itself. If we all know that two or three connections away, we know a lot of people. And I don't know how many connections away everyone is connected to everyone. But it's not as much as the levels of management between the decision makers and you in a big organization. There are more levels than connections we need. So
Mhm.
there is somewhere an excuse for not having human connections. And that is actually the start of an environment that is, well, nowadays we say is toxic.
Mhm.
So if you are that far away from the decision makers, not having human connection, and you sense it is a threat for your own well-being, then I would just take some time and reflect and maybe take a mirror and talk to myself and find out what the reason is that I'm still in that organization. And there could be a good reason. I'm not saying you find out that you're actually in the wrong place. No, there could be a good reason. But finding that good reason actually helps you to fuel your motivation. And by fueling your motivation, you fuel that internal flame so they can throw at you whatever they want. You keep burning on from the inside out. But if you don't know why you are there, then it could be out of fear, could be out of lack. That doesn't fuel you. That pays the bills,
Mhm.
but also keeps you in a very small state of personal growth. And everyone has to decide and find out. I think it's not decide, it's find out, experience how far they grow, how far they journey in life. It's not that there is a format or a process, because then life would be the same as that organizational tension which we are describing.
Mhm.
So I think it's really important to know why you are here, know why you do things. So just to have language to understand what keeps you going, what gets you out of bed.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I think also sometimes when you're in a situation like that or something similar, you don't realize that there's a lot more possibilities and choices. So when you're in that place, how do we like open up our sight so that we can actually see those more possibilities?
That I think that is so good. Like I love to draw curves because I don't believe that growth and life is linear. Maybe it's like infinity loops or spirals. As when we could draw it, I don't know if we can draw it, but to use that one, and I think there is a step somewhere in it that we have to confront ourselves that we partner or have agreement with something that is limiting. It could be a limited ID, it could be a limiting place. And I think it's an invitation to wake up because limit, and I borrow that from Jim Quick. I hope most people know, and if not, please check him out. He's really one of the greatest guys out there. He says a lie is a limited idea entertained. So if I take that further than just the thinking process, if something is limiting, are you entertaining it? If you are entertaining it, why are you entertaining it? And challenge yourself, stop entertaining it. Because the impossible has, in most cases, to do with we don't have language to express and communicate about it. Because there is a lot more possible than what we think that is possible. But we had to let go the framing of this is it. We have to go beyond this is limiting us because then we are in a mindset of it's happening to us.
Mhm.
Well, what if there is an invitation to grow all the way to life is happening as me or beyond me and not just life is happening to me? Of course, there are many stages in between, and we have all our heartbeats from birth to I say from the cradle to the grave. We have all our heartbeats and we need them to walk that journey. But on the small scale, if we settle with a limitation, if we partner with it, it will define us.
Yeah. And you talked about, using hindsight for future insight. And I think it was Einstein who said this, but I can't remember. They said you can't create something in the future that you haven't seen before with the tools and things you're using now because it's something new. So when we're creating, we know where we want to go, but we haven't experienced it. A lot of times when we make decisions, we're looking for evidence of where we were successful and where we weren't. And so we want to avoid the ones where we weren't and keep doing the ones that were successful. But that doesn't always take us to the new place that has all different rules and tools. So, how do we visualize that place? How do we create the path to get to that new place that we haven't been before? We don't really know how it
Mm,
is.
yeah, it's a good question. And I think Einstein said it well. He said we grant him a lot of smart things, and sometimes we wish we could just ask him what he really said. He also said if you keep thinking on the same level as you create the problem, you won't see the solution. He also mentioned that the galaxy is ever expanding by audio. So our thinking and our speaking have a huge impact on seeing the future unfold and and make it part of who we are and the whole embodying manifestation part. One of the first steps is that foresight is something that most people haven't really spent much time with, but we all have it. We all have an experience that we think of someone and then that person calls us or sends an email. Or we even meet that person when we walk around the corner and then we call it coincidence. Well, actually, no, we sensed it before it was seen and it happened. When we talk about it, we start to understand it. So sensing, seeing, and talking about it is really the first part of foresight. Just foresight already gives a huge difference to when we create a vision. If we make a vision on a personal level, we create a vision board and we do it without foresight. We just cut pieces out of a paper and we get all our things that we desire on a big poster. If we use foresight, we start to explore an horizon with where we don't have really yet shape and form how it will look like, but we sense things. That doesn't help to set goals because goals we tend to create on that we know how to do it. It is possible. I learned about half a year ago that someone said to me, and really helped me in my thinking because I'm not about the goal setting. I'm about the learning milestones. And he mentioned that if you set the goal and you know how to get there, it's not a goal, it's a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Just execute the plan, but set your goals without knowing how. And that connected to my mindset of then you that space in between, you have the time to learn how to get to that goal. Well, so with foresight, if you start with this is what we want to learn, this impossible we want to see become reality, then we can set ourselves up by just using our calendar, our agenda, by saying, well, now I decide that I want to learn this in 90 days. I plan in my calendar that in 90 days I will take time apart to reflect on what I have learned. Put that to words, and then I have insight. So that means that if you use foresight to imagine what you will learn, use your calendar to place a moment in time where you reflect back. That's the hindsight. So that's foresight plus hindsight leads to the insight,
Mm-hmm.
which is the building block of wisdom. And now we are moving forward. We keep momentum in our walk of life, in our development as a leader. 90 days, a stage. And the 90 days is a very interesting one as well, because if we look just outside, in 90 days, the seasons change. And every spring is different than the other spring, but we know in the winter the spring is coming. So there's something natural, organic in the 90 days. From a focus point, if you put it on 90 days, it doesn't have urgency, but it has priority to focus on it at day one. You can't wait for a week because then it becomes urgency.
Mm-hmm.
If you do your goals or your vision 5 years, 10 years, you have so much time to not start. And we all know that if we don't start on our New Year's resolutions in January, the moment it gets February, we forgot and we never started it. So this is just a routine to keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And mm, when you get stuck and you stop moving forward, because a lot of people, when you said New Year's resolutions, remind me, um, I used to go to the gym and I was doing spin class, which is like on a bike.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a certain bike I like, so I always sit on that bike. But in January, if I don't get there 15 minutes early before the class, all the new people who just joined, they take my bike. But I'm like, that's okay because by February 15th, I'll get to come the regular time again and I'm going to get my bike back because all those people that started in January, they're going to be all gone and I get my bike back. So when we get that point where we get stuck or stop, how do we keep I don't even think it's the word motivation. How do we go back to who we are and what we want to be without getting distracted? I guess maybe it's distracted.
Yeah. Well, I think it is a part of intrinsic motivation. I actually believe it's the missing element that we normally ignore when we talk about intrinsic motivation. If when we talk about intrinsic motivation, like Daniel Pink introduced in his book Drive, we take his three examples of mastery, purpose, and autonomy. You can know a lot about all three areas and detail it in your language, which I think you should, because else you have nothing to fall back to when life hits you. You still can get stuck. So I think there is something missing and call it the unstuck button. And I think I call it the renewal spark. If you know your language around your renewal spark, then the moment you have ignored too long your intrinsic motivation and you are the fire goes down, you get into the burnout zone, in the red zone, then you just put that button and you reignite. And I imagine that it's like when I grew up as a kid, we only had the hot water gas installation in the kitchen. It was a box about like maybe 10 inches wide and about a feet and a half high. And when the little flame in the middle went out, there was this spark button. And it had really an icon of a spark. And maybe you remember such a thing as well. But over Europe, that was normal. And it was the time that when someone did the dishes and someone else would have a shower, they would shout to you like, turn the tap down because I have only cold water, you know? But at least we had hot water, you know? If you go back to the 50s, that was not even there. But that spark button, do you know what ignites your internal flame? Because it ignites only that you keep moving on your autonomy, your purpose, and your mastery. And I think that's the missing element on the foundation of intrinsic motivation, because this is still talking about my quest, my mission. And I believe that we as human beings, we flourish when we interact with the right other human beings. So that there's more to unpack around intrinsic motivation. But not knowing what renews you, what sparks you, um, gets problematic when the flame goes out.
So, talking about just clarifying what your spark is, who you are, what your spark is. I know I personally, in fact, recently um, took even some more personality tests, interest tests. There's all these assessments. I mean, so many. There's corporate ones, there's personal ones, so it's like, how do we get the clarity? Is it through all these different tests, or is it from asking other people, what do you think about me? How do we figure out the clarity and then actually put it in a language so that we can go back to that?
Well, most tests, they support productivity. So the language it creates and the questions it asks are more about the other three, about how you, not even your autonomy, because then we talk about how you become resilient. And resilience is very important. But if it means that you keep increasing your productivity and you keep standing in an organization that is motivating you, I'm not sure if it's really in your interest. It sounds like it's in the interest of someone else. So you have to phrase and rephrase the language away from being process and production oriented to being human oriented.
Mm.
And then it gives great insight. But by following whatever comes from the outside, you're still complying.
Mhm.
You still try to compare. And we know that comparison is the enemy of, well, I think of everything. So if we take the output of the tests, it is compared to someone else. So it's all external. So
Mhm.
we're back to motivation. So learning about who you are from the inside out, your inner dialogue, your source of life, your own thoughts, get clarity about it. What is the spinning in your head and what is your heart saying, or maybe even your spirit saying? That's a life journey that costs you something because it's not just a fix you buy. It's not something you outsource. You have to do the hard work yourself, but it's really rewarding. And what you hear on the inside, find a group of peers. Because if you start, it starts on the inside, but if you don't check it on the outside, there are two things missing. You don't have the feedback from someone who knows you or knows the journey you're on. So you don't have brutal feedback. And the moment you speak, you hear it yourself. And it's a very old saying, faith comes by hearing. But I think we have to embrace that we all need external processing. And I mean all, no exceptions there, because those who don't do external processing get themselves some kind the empire's clothes syndrome because it starts spinning out of control.
Mhm.
And our head is not the most life-giving place because it's also where our core lizard brain is that tries to protect us. So it promotes predictability. And we talk here about spark and the new and the impossible, and that's all not yet predictable.
Mhm.
So, in short, have a healthy inner dialogue. And what comes out of it, have a healthy inner circle where you can reflect on, and that keeps you growing and moving forward.
Mhm. And now I know you have different things set up in your business where you are providing something like that for people. Do you want to talk about that and how you actually work with people?
Yes, yes, of course. Well, actually, it was my own journey. It was 6 years ago that I really started to get more lively, active inner dialogue, and I realized that I was in a lonely place. Actually, with hindsight, I have for everything more language, but with hindsight, I started to understand that if you are a leader, you carry vision. And when you carry vision, you are lonely because you see things that you're not fully able to put to words yet. And the people around you are probably fully occupied by the current operations. So you simply can't talk about it. It will disrupt them, and that will probably bring the whole machine to a standstill. So you shut up as a leader, which means that the leader equals being lonely. But when you it gets to a place of isolation, it gets really weird. And we have tons of examples of leaders or people in a decision making role that have some strange decision making because they have some sense of that they have some extra privileges that others don't. And then we tell it's happening in their blind spot. They don't see it. Well, no, actually, they have been too long in isolation. So they miss that check and balances, that level of reflection. So I started a peer mastermind group for my own journey and found out that it really helped me on a weekly basis. Not only help other people, but also participate myself in finding language to word by word excel to myself who I'm becoming. So it's a 1 minute pitch of who I am becoming. And the buyer of the pitch is me, because when I start to believe it, I start to behave, act, and the rest will follow. And the test of finding better words really helped me to become more clear about who I am so I could share it with someone else. And the other dimension was, what's my emerging authority? If you can't put your vision into words, or your authority into words, or your identity into words, then actually we only have generic terms.
Mhm.
And we believe that every human being is unique in his expression, in his needs, in his desires, but there's also a common dominator.
Mhm.
And no one finds happiness in that. We find happiness in our uniqueness because that's where our life is happening. So that was an interesting journey, and mainly focusing on forerunners. And I believe that in the maturity stages we go through in life, sometimes we are a waymaker, sometimes we are a forerunner, but then we go back to being a waymaker. So a waymaker is that we interpret what is happening around us. We help people to see what's really happening, what's hidden in plain sight. And then as a waymaker, we say, and this is the path forward. So we find the direction and we go first. Like Simon Sinek, great book, says leaders eat last. Yeah, because they go first.
Mhm.
And but then there is a moment that you start to see where it's going to. So you start to foresee again, but then you also want to cross over. So that it's like what's the English word for that? You flip from being a waymaker to a forerunner to a waymaker to a forerunner. And we see it already at young kids. They all have it. So if you're not sensing it anymore, then well, probably the environment is limiting you and you've been part of entertaining it.
Mhm.
So I started a second group earlier this year actually it was for my 50th birthday. I gave myself an authentic leadership transformation summit, which I did with my valuable connections. And then at the end, we launched what we call the Authentic Leadership Transformation Dialogue, which is just a weekly hour where leaders come and try to articulate what the real question is that is currently emerging. There are so many leaders out there who sense that what they are building is not helping them to fulfill their calling. Not that it is wrong, but there is more.
Mhm.
And what we know from personal development is that we are our own ceiling. So if what's building, we sense it's not enough, we probably have to push our own ceiling so that there is later room enough to build the new. But that push of who am I becoming becomes the central theme. So why not bring leaders together, prioritize personal growth, set 1 hour a week apart, because personal growth is actually the most precious thing you can give to your people. It's not selfish.
Mhm.
It's not selfish at all. Actually, one of my clients says it's really selfish not to prioritize self-leadership, because that means that your people have no hope that you're dealing with your blind spots.
Mhm.
So I started to run those. It's actually the big space where we find language to articulate ourselves, articulate our future, where we test visions, we provoke each other's thoughts, we help to each other to align our dominant thought to who we are and not what we have learned. So yeah, I always look forward to it, to those hours in the week.
Now, I know we have people here who are in the parenting stage, and I also know you don't specifically work with children, although you had children, adult children now. Um, any advice for parents to help them develop their child or help their child develop and to start to have these skills early on, like the foresight and the reflection and the things like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Well, my wife is an educator. So we always talk about these things because most of the things we talk about that people have to learn around their midlife shift is actually what we recognize in the 4 and the 5-year-old child. A 4 or 5-year-old child has a very limited set of language. So in most cases, they express themselves in the language that they heard from their parents reading stories. And most of the stories are fairy tale stories. So that 4 or 5-year-olds talk in princes, dragons, and those kind of things has nothing to do with fantasy. It has to do with the language they heard their parents use when they were reading the books. But what they are trying to do is to, with a limited vocabulary, try to express the new that they are sensing in their play. Education system has no room for this because it's too unpredictable. They can't control it. It's hard to capture in scorecards. So we unlearn it around 6, 7 year old when we learn to read and write, which is really sad because that's were the two missing elements to get more language.
Mhm.
So helping your kids to keep being playful and use their imagination, not exchange it, their intuitive thinking, and exchange it for concrete or abstract thinking, but really see it as things that stack together, your kids will honor you for the rest of your life if you do that. So that's one of the things. The other thing I've heard, like we talked about renewal. Well, that spark is important, but the next step is actually that you know how your rest and your play works together to get back to the space of generating new ideas. Be intuitive, solution oriented, and make the impossible possible. We call that value creation, innovation, fancy words. Every 4 or 5-year-old kid can do it. Um, it's great to involve them in those processes in business as well. So being playful is essential, but your kid can only be playful when it's inspired by you being playful. Someone told me back then when my kids were in that age that maybe the most spiritual thing to do is play with your kids.
Mhm.
And I think that is true. And then when they turn 12, 13, stop parenting them. Become their coach. Let them take ownership and responsibility for their choices. And when they mess up, stand next to them and help them to fix it. Don't take over.
Mhm.
Let them clean the mess, clean up together. We see so much influential positions nowadays in our society where people mess up and then they are deleted from the system and someone else cleans up. Learn your kids how to clean up. If you don't want terrible teens, I think that's how you call it in the US, then make sure you're not standing in their way. When they are younger than 12 years old, then they follow you. They're in survival mode. They need you to protect them. But when they start to discover the world, they need you alongside them. And if you keep standing in front of them, they will bypass you, outgrow you, but they don't keep you informed. They get in horrible situations where they mess up, where you are not around to help them to clean up, and you're not part of their life anymore. So the most valuable advice I ever had in raising my kids when my oldest turned 12 was from my pastor friend, Mark Appleyard, who said, take a step aside, let them come alongside, be their coach. Stop pampering them, stop parenting them. And I I still love him for that. It took me a couple of years to learn it because I had not really had an example in my own life. But my 21-year-old, he turns 21 next month, and my twins of 18, I could say they are the three of my closest friends. They are my best advisors. They know my heart, they know my intuition. I can talk about them about the most complex things. They don't need to understand. It's never a something that's really that important. They know how to hear my heart and give me feedback. And they see the generations at work in my life, and they are part of it themselves. They're part of my business adventures. They travel with me. My best clients that I walk life with sometimes just come to my home and sit around my dinner table. And then my kids have the conversation with them. And as long as they speak Dutch, English, French, or German, or with their hands, my kids can communicate with them.
Mhm.
And that has the biggest impact on their life because now the world is happening at their table.
Mhm.
Does that help?
Oh, yeah, it does. And it's very helpful and profound because, so many of us, at least in the US, we're always doing everything for our kids because we think that's part of being a good parent. But it's not a good parent if when they leave, they don't know what to do.
Yeah, and strategic thinking doesn't happen before the age of 16, which means that with most kids, it never happened. And that's what we find out a lot of times when we enter the boardroom, that strategic thinking is not uh, developed with that taking what you sense and the foresight and the futurizing into account. And then the vision work becomes an extension of what they already have because then the success is predictable. So businesses have a vision for the next couple of years, which is all about scale up,
Mhm.
volume, um, margin, all those kind of things. But that's not vision, that's execution. But it starts with that we haven't learned it. And we develop it somewhere around our 16, 25. But if the kids are no longer connected to the other generations and their most influential inspirators, their parents, where do they develop it? So it's really in their interest as well.
So you talked about being playful with your kids, but also being playful yourself, like taking those time in between. And what you sent me was some of the things you like to do when you're not working. So do you want to talk about that? How those like sailing and the different things you like, how does that play into who you are?
Well, the hobbies, they are not the compensation for too much working on the other end. It is that rhythm of play, rest, being playful in all of life, and sometimes you just take a distance. But when I get on my mountain bike, um, and I have a few bike mates, and the moment they get ahead of me, then they lose me because I just get lost in my own thinking, and I have all these crazy solutions for things that I've been looking for a long time. When I go sailing and we have a few old English open sailing boats in our family, um, playing with the wind, and those who do sailing, they know you never have the wind in your back unless that's the only way to get on course. You want to have the wind from the front. Not fully in the front because then you get to a standstill or a vacuum, but quite high, and that's there the boat is most exciting. So from a very old time ago, they used the sailing boat as the leadership metaphor. And that's in a way what it is, standing yourself outside of the boat, hanging in the trapeze, trying to get your boats level. It's both, it's exciting, it's a thrill, it's hard work. So maybe it's even sports, but just you can't worry. The wind completely occupies you. And so the wind is not the storm, the wind is how you navigate. And of course, we could say we need the wind in our lives. And sailing is a great thing. Yeah, and I don't know which one, other one I probably called camping, mentioned that one. Yeah, we have in Europe the possibility because we don't have much wildlife that we just take a tent and we camp. Some countries you can camp where you want, other countries you need to go to campsites, but not having a hotel, not having that routine, going back to basics, opening in the early morning hours the zipper of your tent and see the top of a mountain or an Italian lake. I love to combine that with the small sailing boat, just do both at the same time. Yeah, that unwinds me in a deep, profound way. And it always results in that creativity starts to flow. I start getting new ideas. Um, yeah, I think that's where it is. And I'm not doing it enough because actually you have to do something, I believe, every day, and sometimes it doesn't work. So, well, and it's not like you do one thing, you have to compensate it. It's find the ecosystem, find the rhythms.
Well, I think people would love to connect with you. So at this point, tell us, where they connect and any business things you want to promote.
Well, the easiest way is to connect through LinkedIn. So it's just AP Visser is my profile, and I'm sure it will be in the comments of the podcast. And if you want to know more about me, the website businessrevivalists.com. It's where we are rebuilding it to only make it about the accelerators. And we talked about that, the coaching, the the groups, the dialogue groups we have, and that there's also the link to the book Lead the Future, and soon hopefully the second book. Well, I'm trying to get my head around about the outlines of the manuscript, but that's the easiest way: LinkedIn or the website.
All right. Well, now I have a personal question. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Yeah, that's one of the most profound coaching questions. And then when I would explain that, I'll make the same mistake as every coachee asks that question. Because I will tell you what I love to see happening in other people. I love to see that people get their spark back into their eyes when they find language or find clarity about who they are and where they are going. And then I always challenge them. What makes you happy? Why is that so important to you? And the result is that what makes you really happy is when you feel life flowing, what's life giving. So it's not selfish. It's the core of my resonance with others and to help them. What makes me really happy is when I feel that spark, when I feel alive, and that could be in a conversation with someone where we crack the code about something that we didn't see the answer before, or just a good cup of coffee. But there is always, is it life given? Does it give life to the other person? Does it give life to me? Because then the resonance between us, that becomes, that's the glue, the magnet. So that means it could be in so many versions and shapes and formats, but the core essence of what makes me happy is that I feel alive and feel momentum in my sailing boat or just this podcast.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that and for being on the podcast and for all your really deep thoughts and ideas that I think will have people thinking and reflecting for a long time.
Well, thank you for pushing the buttons, and I will listen to the podcast myself as well. You know, just yeah, it went smooth in that sense. So probably I said a lot of things that I have to ponder about myself again and again. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, so I have one last question. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Find out who you are becoming. Find the words. Keep speaking them to yourself every day so that it will shape you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Arjan. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, we do. Thank you. Bye bye.